1927, Nash introduced a premium version of its top model, the Advanced 6 sedan, under the name Ambassador, a name not without meaning, as Nash relied on the export of luxury models with a customer base that included European royalty. It ran on a 130-inch wheelbase using a 278 cubic inch overhead valve straight 6 with 78 horsepower. Starting in 1930, it was offered in wheelbases from 124 to 133 and was powered by a 299 cubic inch 100 horsepower twin ignition 8, and the car would earn itself the nickname the Kenosha Duesenberg. The following year, horsepower increased to 115. Starting in 1932, it was its own separate model as the Ambassador 8, now with up to a 142-inch wheelbase and a 322 cubic inch straight 8 with 125 horsepower. With prices starting at around $1,900, it was one of the few cars that were profitable that year. 1934 saw new Speedstream Art Deco streamlining, and the short wheelbase versions were dropped, leaving the 133 and 142-inch wheelbase versions, and prices were reduced to $1,500. All of this only to be replaced by aeroform styling in 1935 and a significant move down market, with only a 125-inch wheelbase and the engine being reduced to 261 cubic inches and 102 horsepower, and prices dropping to $1,100. And it would once again be available with the 6-cylinder in 1936 at 235 cubic inches and 93 horsepower, dropping the price even lower to $900 and increasing sales. In 1937, the wheelbase was shortened even more to 121 inches, but the 6 was up to 105 horsepower and the 8 was up to 115. Technically, by 1941, all new Nashes were Ambassadors, but the new 600 series was a distinct model from the top-line Ambassador 6 and 8, running on a shorter 112-inch wheelbase and using full unitized construction compared to the 121-inch wheelbase and unibody on frame of the bigger cars. It also cost $100 less than the Ambassador 6, starting at only $900. Twin ignition went away in 1942, returning the cars to single spark plugs, and production was suspended from 1943 to 1945 per government order due to the war effort. After the war, only the 235 straight 6 was available, now up to 112 horsepower and prices starting at around $1,500. A one-year run of 1,000 convertibles was offered in 1948, costing $450 more than a base $1,900 coupe. 1949 saw new styling using aircraft-inspired techniques and wind tunnel testing to create what they called the most streamlined car on the road, which included a one-piece curved windshield as well as enclosed wheel wells that would end up giving the car the nickname the upside-down bathtub. It retained its 121-inch wheelbase and was up to 201 inches long, and the starting price climbed to $2,100. 1950 would see Nash offer a Hydromatic automatic transmission from GM with Selecto Lift starting, where you would start the car by pulling the column-mounted shift lever towards you and up. The body would be stretched in 1951 to 210 inches, and the 6 would be up to 115 horsepower. 1952 saw updated styling that was credited to Pininfarina, and it was available in 2- and 4-door sedan as well as country club hardtop body styles. The base version was called the Ambassador Super, and the upmarket version the Ambassador Custom, which included such features as two-tone interior, a clock, and full wheel covers. The Super Jetfire 253 cubic inch straight 6 had 120 horsepower and was backed by either the Hydromatic or a 3-speed Warner overdrive unit, and starting prices were up to $2,600. Starting in 1953, the Ambassadors were available with the dual carbs and aluminum heads of the Le Mans option from the Nash Healey sports car, increasing output to 140. Starting in 1954, the Ambassador would be the first car with a fully integrated heating and air conditioning system. an option that could be had for less than $350, and base horsepower was up to 130, all of which helped sales climb to 40,000. 1955 would see it get heavily updated styling with a Cenoramic wraparound windshield, as well as a 208 horsepower Packard 320 cubic inch V8 and Ultramatic transmission. In the middle of the following year, the Ambassador Special was introduced, along with AMC's own 250 cubic inch 190 horsepower V8. In 1957, the Ambassador became the first car with standard quad headlights, and it was available in three-tone color schemes. The Packard V8 was gone, but the Packard Ultramatic remained, while the AMC V8 was up to 327 cubic inches and 255 horsepower and 345 pound-feet of torque, and there was no longer a 6, so prices climbed back up to $2,800. Nash would be discontinued for 1958, but the Ambassador name continued on as a longer 117-inch wheelbase version of the Rambler, compared to the Rebel's 108-inch wheelbase and the American's 100-inch wheelbase. The 327 V8 carried over, now with 270 horsepower, and was now backed by a Borg-Warner automatic with push-button controls. It was capable of 0 to 60 in under 10 seconds and the quarter mile in 17. It was available as a 4-door sedan or 4-door wagon with hardtop variants of both. Features included power steering, power brakes, power windows, limited slip differential, padded dash, and lap belts. Prices were down to $2,600 and sales were down to $15,000. 1959 saw minor updates, including the first adjustable headrests, and sales were back up from the previous year to $24,000, but less than 600 of the hardtop wagons were sold. With more updates for 1960, both the 250 horsepower and 270 horsepower versions were available, and although most body panels changed, the look from the front remained similar. The car was marketed as a luxury compact, but in the eyes of many Americans, it was the first mid-size sedan, and sales remained relatively unchanged. The front end was restyled for 1961 to look more European, and sales declined to 19,000, but it was the most economical V8 of the period, and only cost $2,400. 1962 saw the end of the hardtops and the return of the two-door, as the name was moved to the shorter 108-inch wheelbase body of the Classic, and was no longer being distanced from other, more economical Ramblers in marketing. And with the same engine options, it was quite the performer, so it's no surprise that 36,000 of the $2,300 cars sold. A new, larger Ambassador returned for 1963 with a cleaner shape and a 112-inch wheelbase. The unibody construction was greatly improved and engines carried over, although the push buttons were replaced by a column shifter. The new design helped Rambler earn Car of the Year that year, with the top-line Ambassador 990 outselling the base Ambassador 880, and total sales were up to 38,000, with the base price remaining about $2,400. A hardtop returned in 1964, at least in two-door form, and there was a new twin-stick performance option that was essentially a 3-speed with a high and low range for second and third gears. But prices were up to $2,800, and sales were down to $19,000. 1965 saw AMC shift its focus from the ever-expanding small car market and back to the mainstream. As such, the Ambassador's wheelbase grew to 116 inches, all of it in front of the cowl. It still managed to average 17 miles per gallon, but this was mostly because the full line of engines were once again available, including the 6s, in order to match what the big 3 were offering at the time. And, for the second time, a convertible was offered. Prices went back down to $2,600, and sales climbed up to $64,000. In 1966, the Rambler name got replaced with AMC to transition the image from economy to luxury, and critics seemed to think the quality was superior to many luxury brands. It got a new top-line Diplomat trim level with DPL badging that got more standard features as well as additional options, such as bucket seats and a vinyl top. Of 65,000 total sold, only 10,000 were the Diplomat. The car got even bigger for 1967, now up to 118-inch wheelbase, and it was already the last year of the convertible. The car's interior was retrimmed to be both safer and more luxurious, and all new engines included a 200 horsepower 290 cubic inch V8 and a 343 cubic inch V8 with up to 280 horsepower and 365 pound-feet of torque. The body was now also shared with the fastback Marlin, and prices were down again to $2,500 to start. Also, specialty commercial versions were being made for uses by postal services, emergency services, primarily police, and as taxicabs. In 1968, air conditioning became a standard feature on the Ambassador, something only Rolls-Royce beat them to. Other updates included the introduction of AMC's iconic flush-mounted door handles and a new bigger 390 cubic inch V8 with 315 horsepower, and prices were once again climbing, now up to $2,800 to start. 1969 saw yet another restyle and more growth, longer, wider, and a 122-inch wheelbase. The new look was supposed to be more luxurious, and in spite of marketing its limousine-like ride, the Sixes were still available, although some actually were converted to limousines. The right-hand drive commercial models made for the post office also made it easier to export to right-hand drive countries. For 1970, the 290 V8 grew to 304 cubic inches and 210 horsepower, and the 343 V8 grew to 360 cubic inches with 245 to 290 horsepower. The top engine was still the 390, which was up to 325 horsepower and 420 pound-feet of torque. 1971 saw more standard features, but the Diplomat had become the base model. The mid-range was the SST, and the top model was now the Brom. Base models now used a 256 straight 6 with 150 horsepower, while the AMX 390 was replaced by a 401 with 335 horsepower. And by this point, base models were primarily aimed specifically at fleet sales. The industry's first one-year bumper-to-bumper warranty was added in 1972, and the base Diplomat trim was canceled. The grille returned to metal, having been plastic since the last redesign, and the Borg-Warner transmission was replaced by a Chrysler torque flight called the Torque Command. The SST was dropped for 1973, leaving only the top-line Brom, and standard features now included front disc brakes, white wall tires, 5-mile-an-hour bumpers, and a 2-year maintenance plan. By 1974, prices were up to $4,600, and 7 inches were added to the body. The 2-door was dropped, and a bigger 25-gallon fuel tank was added, as well as a heavy-duty alternator for the trailer package, which was rated at 5,000 pounds. But a larger Ambassador timed to follow the fuel crisis seemed like a bad idea, particularly in lieu of AMC's dinosaur fighter history, meaning that the newest Ambassador would be the last Ambassador, after 25,000 were sold, which would just turn out to be the beginning of the end for AMC. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to comment below.